The smell of antiseptic seemed to have seeped into Elena's very essence after 18 years in the children's hospital. It had taught her not only to pinpoint the cause of a child's tears with uncanny accuracy from a single glance, but also to preserve her compassion on the most exhausting days. Today was one of those days, a seasonal infection outbreak, doubled workload due to her partner's illness, an endless stream of young patients with similar complaints, and their parents, whose eyes betrayed sleepless nights. Elena emerged from the subway earlier than usual. Marina Semyonovna, the head of the department, seeing her extreme fatigue, had practically pushed her out of the office. "Go celebrate your anniversary," she said. 18 years is serious. Victor has surely prepared something special. 18 years, exactly the time that passed since the day she first saw Victor. It happened in the lobby of a clinic under construction. Tall, well-built, with an unruly mop of dark hair, he was animatedly gesturing, holding a roll of papers. The chief engineer, brought in for a consultation on the new wing setup, had something in his confident movements and the way his fingers gripped a pencil that made her heart race. In her hands, Elena held a box of pastries from their favorite bakery, a small, traditional anniversary surprise. A smile touched her weary face. The kids would be thrilled. Maxim, the eldest, would claim the one with bright glaze. Liza would get the berry one. And little Igor, who recently declared sweets unserious, would secretly snatch the most chocolatey one. Opening the door with her key, she was surprised by the unusual silence. Normally, the house was filled with the sounds of games or the children's laughter at this hour. "Victor, kids," she called. A faint rustle came from their bedroom. Oddly, Victor never returned from the site before 7, and it was only just past 4. Could he be unwell? The bedroom door was ajar, a strip of light spilling into the dark hallway like an ominous portent. Elena pushed the door open and froze, as if time had stopped along with her heart. Victor was on their bed with a young woman. Her blonde hair splayed across the pillow. Shards of cruel reality pierced Elena's consciousness. Her gaze mechanically noted a woman's blouse tossed on a chair, wine glasses on the bedside table, and her husband's horrified expression. The pastry box slipped from her hands, the sweets scattering across the floor in bright stains, reminiscent of shattered hopes. "Lena," Victor jumped up, hastily pulling on clothes. "You were supposed to be on duty." The girl, God, she couldn't be more than 20, clutched the sheet, her large gray eyes darting fearfully between them. A strange, almost unnatural calm enveloped Elena. No screams, no tears, just an icy clarity, as if she were observing someone else's tragedy through impenetrable glass. "They let me go early." Her voice sounded hollow and detached. 18 years today since we met. Images flashed in her memory. Victor kissing her under a warm summer rain, his face when she told him about her first pregnancy, his hands gently cradling newborn Maxim, the pride in his eyes when Liza won her first music competition award, his strong shoulders that little Igor loved to ride on. When had they started drifting apart? Perhaps when he got that big project and began staying late at work, or when she stopped sharing her worries, noticing his absent gaze, or when they stopped arguing because it was easier to stay silent. "This is Angela." Victor introduced a young woman, who was now dressed and pressed against the wall, as if trying to become invisible. "I'm his assistant," the girl said with difficulty. "We've been meaning to explain," Victor continued, his voice gaining some firmness. "I was going to leave. Angela and I love each other." "Of course," Elena finished mechanically, another cliché phrase, another banal situation, as if they were playing roles in a poorly written play. The front door slammed. Elena flinched. It was Maxim returning from practice. His confident steps approached. "Mom!" he called, and in that moment, the icy shell encasing Elena cracked. Tears streamed from her eyes. The next hour stretched into eternity. Liza and Igor returned from school and music studio. Victor gathered the children in the living room. Angela quietly slipped out of the apartment, casting a guilty glance at the family photos in the hallway. "Mom and I have decided to live apart." Victor's voice rang with false cheerfulness. "But we'll still love you just as much." 7-year-old Igor, with the same unruly dark hair as his father, looked from one adult to another with incomprehension. "You won't live with us anymore?" he asked, his lower lip trembling. Then who'll fix my toys? Liza, a fragile 11-year-old with large, thoughtful eyes, pulled away from her father and buried herself in her tablet, as if seeking refuge there. Maxim, nearly as tall as his father, lifted his chin, crossed his arms, and said with feigned indifference, "Fine, then. More space for us." Elena looked at her children, so different yet so infinitely dear, and realized their world had just collapsed, irrevocably changed, just like her own, now lying in fragments at her feet, like those pastries on the floor of their former shared bedroom. The lawyer in Borisovna's office reminded Elena of a sterile ward, impersonal, with a faint smell of old papers and unspoken problems. The older woman, with a penetrating gaze from behind her glasses, studied the documents, occasionally tapping her pen on the desk. The sound echoed in Elena's temples like a ticking bomb. "Here's the thing," Inna Borisovna said, removing her glasses and rubbing the bridge of her nose. "The apartment is registered to his parents. Legally, you have no claim to it." The words fell like a heavy stone between them. "But we paid the mortgage together." Elena gripped the armrest of the chair so tightly her knuckles turned white. "My savings went into it, too. Without proper documentation, that, unfortunately, doesn't matter." The lawyer's voice held sympathy mixed with unyielding firmness. "You both made payments on a mortgage taken out in his name to purchase property for his parents. Property acquired this way isn't considered jointly owned. The apartment legally belongs to his parents, not Victor." Through the office window, a gray, heavy sky loomed, oppressive like a lid. Elena didn't cry. Her tears had dried up a week ago when Victor packed his things and left. "What about alimony?" 3 children. Her voice was barely audible. "We'll fight for the maximum possible payments." Inna Borisovna nodded. "But from what I understand, your ex-husband has good lawyers and ways to hide his real income. He's already filed a counterclaim requesting the minimum alimony amount, citing temporary financial difficulties." The scratch of the pen on paper, and once again, life was reduced to dry lines of legal jargon. The dissolution of family translated into articles and clauses. Waking up the alarm at 6 a.m. became a new ritual. Extra shifts, arranged with Marina Semyonovna, meant Elena left home while the children were still asleep, and returned when little Igor was already dreaming his 10th dream. "I'll manage," she told her reflection in the mirror, tightly braiding her hair. "We'll manage." But the children were changing. Maxim came home from practice with bruised knuckles more often. "Fell awkwardly," he'd mutter when Elena tried to treat his scrapes. "The coach called twice. Your son's become too aggressive. Maybe you should talk to him, find out what's going on." Liza developed a habit of sitting by the window for hours, clutching an old toy her father had given her and forgotten during his move. Her drawings darkened. Where vibrant colors once dominated, now somber tones prevailed. The music teacher, concerned, asked what was wrong with Liza, such a talented child whose etudes now sounded so anxious. And Igor started waking up at night from fears, something that hadn't happened since early childhood. He demanded constant attention, threw tantrums at daycare, and refused to eat. "If I behave really well, will Dad come back?" he asked before bed, and Elena didn't know what to say. Exhaustion became her chronic companion. Her skin took on an unhealthy pallor, and deep shadows settled under her eyes, no makeup able to conceal them. The courthouse loomed like a massive, soulless monolith carved from gray stone and cold indifference. Elena adjusted the collar of her modest blouse, feeling like an actress auditioning for a role utterly foreign to her. "Stay calm," Inna Borisovna whispered, squeezing her elbow. Judge Shaw values composure. In the hallway, they saw Victor. He looked rested, as if the past months had left no mark on him. Beside him stood Angela, her hand demonstratively resting on his shoulder. Her presence felt like a slap, unnecessary by protocol, and thus deliberate. "Why is she here?" Elena whispered, nausea rising in her throat. "Psychological pressure," Inna Borisovna muttered. "Ignore it." The hearing lasted less than an hour, but to Elena, it felt like an eternity. The judge, a heavy-set man with distracted gaze, was clearly eager to wrap up the case. Victor spoke confidently. wielding legal terminology with the ease of someone accustomed to such battles. Given the defendant's temporary financial difficulties due to the launch of a major new project, his speech flowed smoothly. I request the alimony be set at the minimum legally permissible amount. When it was Elena's turn to speak, her voice nearly failed her. She fell on Angela's appraising gaze in the front row, her impeccable hairstyle and expensive jewelry gleaming. "We have 3 children," Elena said simply. "Maxim is 16, heavily involved in sports. He needs proper nutrition and equipment. Liza attends music school, which also requires expenses. Igor is 7. He needs after-school care. I work 1.5 shifts, but I need their father's financial support." For a moment, she thought she saw a flicker of fleeting embarrassment in Victor's eyes, but it lasted only an instant. "I have one more request," he suddenly said as the judge prepared to announce the decision. "I ask for the return of all valuable gifts I gave my ex-wife and children over the years of our marriage, in accordance with such and such article." A murmur rippled through the courtroom. Even Victor's lawyer looked surprised. "Please clarify which gifts you mean," the judge asked, barely hiding his irritation. "Jewelry, expensive electronics, art pieces, gadgets." Victor listed, avoiding Elena's gaze. "Everything I personally purchased and gifted over the past few years." Elena felt a strange warmth spread through her chest, as if something long suppressed had finally broken free. She looked at her ex-husband, his pale face, his averted gaze, and for the first time in weeks, she smiled genuinely. "I agree." Her voice rang out unexpectedly loud and clear. "On one condition. I request an official inventory of all the gifts I'm to return, with their approximate value and date of gifting." Victor flinched, as if struck unexpectedly. "Why an inventory? We can just—" "No." Elena shook her head. "I'll return everything down to the last trinket, but I need a document." He's demanding the return of gifts. Alexei, a cardiologist from the neighboring department, sat across from Elena in the hospital cafeteria. Soft light fell on his tired face with kind, attentive eyes. Elena knew Alexei had gone through a painful divorce years ago, perhaps why he was the only one who could listen silently without offering banal comforts. "Can you imagine?" Elena stirred her cool drink thoughtfully. "Sometimes you need to confront someone with the true consequences of their choices. I'll return those things, every single one. But why the inventory?" Alexei didn't understand. "It'll only drag out and complicate the process." "Because some things can't be measured in money." Elena's smile was enigmatic and slightly sad. "I'll prove that objects don't define the true value of relationships and family." Outside the cafeteria window, the first snow fell, fragile flakes melting upon touching the warm ground. Elena watched them, thinking how easily the seemingly unshakable and eternal could crumble, and how costly freedom could be, the kind you don't ask for but receive as an inevitable gift of fate. Sunlight filtered through loosely drawn curtains, illuminating myriads of tiny dust motes dancing in the air. Elena stood in the middle of the living room, armed with boxes and markers. On the table lay the document, an inventory of items compiled by Victor's lawyer. Each line evoked a strange mix of bitterness and inexplicable liberation. "Kids," she called, her voice trembling slightly. "We need to gather some things for Dad." They entered reluctantly, this new, strange family of 4, each carrying their invisible wounds. Maxim, angular and tense, crossed his arms. Liza slipped in like a shadow, taking an observational post by the window. Igor simply pressed himself to his mother's side like a frightened kitten. "Why do we have to give back our stuff?" Maxim asked gruffly. "They're gifts." "You don't take gifts back." "Dad wants them back," Elena replied, striving to keep her voice even. "And the court decided we have to return them. Everything." Igor's eyes filled with tears. "My constructor, too?" Elena knelt before her youngest son, gazing into his face. So like Victor's, yet infinitely more open and pure. "Everything Dad gave us over these years. But you know what?" She gently touched his chest. "What's in here he can't take." They began in the children's rooms, at first hesitantly, as if parting with pieces of their souls, then with growing enthusiasm, turning the bitter duty into a sort of game of exploring the past. Maxim pulled a box from the closet, containing his first sports awards. "Remember?" he asked, handing his mother a tarnished metal medallion. "First place at the city competition." Dad was shouting louder than anyone in the stands. For a moment, his face brightened, as if the years dissolved, and before her stood that little boy who first tasted victory. He took that medal to his office to show everyone. Elena said quietly, stroking the engraving. Then he ordered a special stand for it. "Think he needs it now with his new life?" Maxim asked bitterly. Liza silently brought a leather-bound album, her fingers tenderly caressing the embossed inscription, "To my little music sorceress." "Dad gave it to me for my 9th birthday," she whispered, slowly flipping through pages filled with musical notations and her childhood compositions. Each sheet bore Victor's sprawling signature. "Brilliant. Future star. My pride." "He searched the whole city for this album," Elena said, stroking her daughter's hair. "Said an ordinary one wouldn't do for such an extraordinary girl." Igor adamantly refused to part with a large plush lion. "But Dad gave it to me when I was sick," he sobbed, clutching the toy. "He said the lion would protect me." Maxim unexpectedly knelt beside his brother. "Know why Dad wants his gifts back?" he asked with sudden, mature wisdom. "Because they remind him of us, and it probably hurts him to remember he left us. Maybe if we return the lion, he'll come see us more often?" Igor asked hopefully. Elena turned away, so the children wouldn't see the tears welling in her eyes. Even Maxim, with all his feigned toughness, was still a child longing for his father. Among piles of old magazines, Elena found a glossy architecture journal with an interview featuring Victor, sitting in what was then their shared family living room, discussing his projects. "My family is my main source of inspiration," read a highlighted quote. "A home isn't just walls, but a space filled with love and warmth. I design buildings thinking of people who love each other as much as my wife and I love our children." Elena skimmed the date. Barely over a year ago. Even then, his affair with Angela was in full swing. That same evening, dozens of kilometers away, in a new apartment with huge windows and cold minimalist design, Victor hunched over blueprints. The walls, decorated in stark gray tones, devoid of photos or mementos, felt like an expensive but soulless hotel room rather than a home. The night city glittered below, indifferent to human dramas. "You promised we'd go to that new restaurant tonight." Angela's voice rang with barely concealed irritation. "This is the 3rd time this week you've canceled our plans for work." Victor rubbed the bridge of his nose, a familiar gesture he used when Elena reproached him for staying late. "The deadlines are tight," he said wearily. "We can go tomorrow." "I saw a stunning necklace in the shop window downtown." Angela sat on the edge of the table, playing with a strand of hair. "Your ex had something similar, only simpler." "Elena," he looked at her, puzzled. "No, where would she get that?" "You gave her jewelry, didn't you?" Angela pressed. "I saw photos in your old albums." Victor set down his pencil, pushed aside the blueprints, and stood, feeling a sudden heaviness in his body. "Listen, I work around the clock to pay for this apartment, your car, and alimony. Now's not the best time for expensive necklaces." Meanwhile, Elena found an old shoebox where she'd stored receipts and medical bills over the years. Maxim's knee surgery after a sports injury, Liza's braces, Igor's speech therapy, payments for extracurriculars, tutors, and school supplies. Sorting through these paper remnants of years lived, she suddenly saw clearly what she'd always felt but couldn't articulate. Her contribution to the family was immense. Not just sleepless nights by sick children's beds or endless household care, but tangible, significant financial costs. "He thinks he supported us," she whispered, staring at the substantial stacks of receipts. "But we were equal partners. Always." Inna Borisovna came the next day to help with the final inventory for the transfer of items. The older woman carefully examined the gathered boxes, making notes in the documents. "You know," she said suddenly, removing her glasses, "my husband, may he rest in peace, was also taken by a young assistant. 30 years we lived, soul to soul, and he left without looking back." Elena lifted her eyes from a box of family photos. "What did you do?" "I let him go," the lawyer replied simply. "Signed all the papers, gave him half of what was considered jointly owned, and started living again. The first year was tough, I won't lie, But then I realized I'd been given a chance. You've been given one too. Elena, don't waste on resentment or regrets. That evening, with the children asleep, Elena sat at the kitchen table and took out a blank sheet of paper. Her hand trembled slightly, but then steadied as she wrote the first line. Victor, with these things, I'm returning not just material possessions, but a part of our shared history. The letter held no reproaches or accusations, only a quiet statement of fact. Astra's true values cannot be packed into a box. They cannot be reclaimed by a court order. No matter how hard someone tries to escape their past, it remains a part of their soul forever. Astra is finishing. She carefully folded the letter and placed it at the bottom of a large cardboard box, under layers of children's drawings, school notebooks, sports certificates, and photos, like a message in a bottle cast into a vast ocean of time, hoping it would someday reach its recipient. The courier rang the doorbell at exactly 10 a.m. Victor met him in an expensive robe, a gift from Angela for their anniversary. The box was unexpectedly massive, an unwieldy cardboard monolith wrapped in tape, bearing Elena's bold signature. Sign here, the courier said indifferently, handing over a tablet. The sender paid for everything. Victor placed the box in the middle of the spacious living room. The morning light streaming through panoramic windows gave the appearance of a strange, out-of-place altar. The minimalist interior, which Angela had meticulously curated over the past month, suddenly seemed empty and lifeless next to this massive piece of his past life. Angela emerged from the bedroom, wrapping her wet hair in a towel. "What's that?" she asked, pausing at the threshold. "Elena returned my gifts." Victor's voice carried a strange note he couldn't quite identify, anticipation mixed with inexplicable unease. "All the jewelry?" Angela perked up, stepping closer. "Those emerald earrings I saw in an old photo? And that diamond necklace you gave her for your 15th anniversary?" "Yes, that one." Victor nodded, cutting the tape with a knife. "It cost a fortune." The first thing they saw upon opening the box was a tiny knitted mitten, soft blue wool, with a clumsily embroidered sailboat. Victor recognized it instantly. Igor's first mitten, lost in the park years ago, when a whole family searched for it in the snowdrifts. Beneath it lay a stack of Liza's drawings, school diaries from all three children, Maxim's crafts from a construction set, carefully wrapped in bubble wrap. "What's this junk?" Angela fished out a faded children's T-shirt with small handprints, bewildered. "Where's the jewelry? And what are these papers?" Hundreds of photos. Their life together frozen in a moment of happiness. Elena holding newborn Maxim, her eyes glowing with a radiant light unique to first-time mothers. Liza in a snowflake costume at a New Year's recital. Victor asleep in an armchair with tiny Igor on his chest. On the back of each photo, in Elena's neat, familiar handwriting, were dates and comments. Astra's first zoo trip. Maxim was scared of the giraffe at first, but then wouldn't stop talking about how tall it was. "You carry him on your shoulders all day." Asterisk, asterisk, Liza won the young pianist competition. You took time off from an important meeting and arrived with a huge bouquet of her favorite daisies. She said it was the best day of her life. Asterisk, asterisk, Igor learned to ride a two-wheeler. You ran after him across the courtyard, and the neighbors laughed that a respectable engineer was chasing a little cyclist like a kid. Asterisk. Victor sifted through the photos. Each one a gut punch, a painful reminder of the happiness he destroyed with his own hands. "Where's the jewelry?" Angela repeated insistently, rifling through the box's contents in frustration. "Did she hide them?" "That's not fair. You said she agreed to return all the valuable gifts." "Here are Maxim's medals," Victor said quietly, pulling out tarnished discs on worn ribbons. "His first gold at the city competition. I took a day off to go with him." A phone call interrupted their tense silence. Maxim's name flashed on the screen. Victor froze, his finger hovering over the answer button. He hadn't spoken to his son in nearly a month, since that day in court. "Dad." The voice on the line sounded hesitant, as if the boy feared rejection. "Hey, son." Victor turned away from Angela, who rolled her eyes dramatically and stepped to the window. "I have an important qualifying competition next week." Maxim rushed on, as if afraid his father would cut him off. "Running a new distance. The coach says I have a good shot at making the regional team." A pause, heavy breathing on the line. "I was wondering, maybe you'd come?" Like before. Victor looked at the photo spread on the floor, the history he'd so carelessly tried to erase. Of course, he replied hoarsely. Of course I'll come. What's the date? As he jotted down the details. Angela left the room with an irritated expression. After the call, Victor continued unpacking the box. At the bottom, he found an envelope with his name in Elena's familiar calligraphic handwriting. His hands trembled slightly as he opened it. Asterisk Victor. With these things, I'm returning a part of our history, one that cannot be valued in any monetary terms. You wanted your gifts back. Here they are. Every photo, every child's drawing, every medal. These are your most valuable gifts to us. You gave us a family, memories, moments of happiness. And now it's as if you're taking them back. But here's the paradox. True values cannot be reclaimed. They stay with us, even when we try to renounce them. Asterisk, the letter mentioned Igor's smile when he first saw the sea, the pride in Liza's eyes when her painting was displayed at a school exhibition, Maxim's resilience when he fell during a race but got up and finished. Asterisk, I don't hold a grudge against you. Perhaps our marriage truly ran its course. But our children, they're not something you can simply walk away from and forget. They wait for you, even if they don't say it, especially if they don't say it. Elena, asterisk. He sat on the floor amid scattered memories as Angela returned, dressed to go out. Tight dress, high heels, bold makeup. I'm going to a friend's party, she tossed out, not looking at him. Since you're so interested in digging through this old junk. The door slammed, and Victor was left alone in the vast, empty apartment, filled with the ghosts of lost happiness. How are you feeling today? The therapist, a young woman with sharp, perceptive eyes, spoke softly but without condescension. Elena watched as Igor enthusiastically built a tower of colorful blocks in the corner of the office. Liza sat at a small table, drawing, her artwork, for the first time in a while, bursting with vibrant, joyful colors. Maxim had refused to come, but Elena didn't push him. Better, she answered honestly. Like I've shed a huge weight from my soul. Sending that box. I completed something. It was necessary, not so much for him as for us, for me. On the way home, they ran into Alexei, the cardiologist with whom Elena had been sharing more frequent lunches in the hospital cafeteria. He was walking his golden retriever in the park, and Igor rushed to the dog with a delighted squeal. Careful, Alexei warned with a smile, but the dog was already licking the boy's cheek. Ajax loves kids. Do you love dogs? Igor asked simply, looking up at the man. Something in the child's directness made both Elena and Alexei laugh. They sipped tea on a park bench, discussing a recent medical conference and books they'd both read, while the kids played with the dog on the grass. For the first time in months, Elena felt genuine peace. Not the hopeless numbness that had become her constant companion, but true serenity. That evening, after putting the children to bed, she paused by the old piano in the corner of the living room. Its dusty lid and keys hadn't been touched in years. Music had once been her passion, her outlet, her way of speaking to the world. Then came family work, household chores, and the keys fell silent. She sat on a round stool, tentatively playing the first cautious chords. Her fingers remembered, her body remembered, with the first notes of a long-forgotten waltz. Something long-lost stirred in her soul, a sense of her own worth, her wholeness, independent of others' choices or actions. The music filled the apartment, washing away the shadows of the past and opening doors to an unknown but no longer frightening future. Spring burst into the city with gusts of warm wind, bringing the scent of awakening earth and new hopes. 2 months in this new reality had taught Elena much, to live by a tightly structured schedule, to make important decisions without looking at others' opinions, and, hardest of all, to find the strength to smile at her children even when exhaustion and anxiety gripped her inside. A large calendar appeared on the kitchen wall, covered in colorful notes. Liza's dentist, for 30 p.m., Igor's parent-teacher meeting, Maxim's competition. Life laid out in neat squares seemed to leave no room for chance. There was also a chore chart. Maxim proudly took charge of keeping his room clean and helping with groceries, while Liza cared for flowers and helped Igor with his homework. Maxim had changed noticeably in these months, as if he broadened his shoulders under the weight of new responsibility. After school, he worked part-time, helping an elderly neighbor with minor repairs, and returned home with a tired but satisfied smile, ceremoniously handing his mother his earnings. For new sneakers for Igor, he'd explain, avoiding her gaze. His old ones are completely worn out. Elena saw how her eldest son was trying to fill the void left by his father. Sometimes she wanted to tell him, "You don't have to. You're still a kid. Rest." But she understood this maturity helped him cope with his own pain and resentment. One April day, as spring rain drummed on the clinic's windowsills, an alarming call came from a school. Elena's heart sank. Calls from a homeroom teacher never boded well. Elena Viktorovna. The teacher's voice was agitated. Igor was just taken to the hospital. Severe abdominal pain, nausea. The doctors suspect something serious with his intestines. The world shrank to the size of the phone receiver. The next half hour blurred into a feverish nightmare. Taking leave from work, calling a taxi, frantic calls to the older kids to meet at the hospital. The pediatric surgery ward greeted her with sterile whiteness, the sharp smell of medicine, and a pervasive sense of fear. A young doctor with tired eyes spoke of the need for urgent surgery, suspected acute appendicitis with complications, high fever, and poor test results. "We need your documents and, per hospital policy, written consent from both parents for emergency surgery under general anesthesia." Both. Elena felt her knees buckle. As a doctor, she understood the gravity of the situation. But maternal fear clouded everything. "We're divorced," she said. In a divorce, a special court order is needed for sole medical decision-making authority for a child. Without it, the second parent's consent is required. "Do you have the father's contact information?" Elena dialed Victor's number, as if it could speed up the relentless march of time. 1 ring, 2, 3. The subscriber is temporarily unavailable. She dialed again and again, her fingers trembling so much she missed the buttons twice. Liza clung to her, pale with fear. "Mom, what's wrong with Igor? Will he be okay?" "He'll be fine, Bunny." Elena repeated the age-old maternal mantra, even as she desperately didn't believe her own words. "Where's Maxim?" "Calling Dad from the payphone in the hallway." Liza replied, said the signal's better there. Action was needed. Elena remembered Inna Borisovna, the only person who could navigate the legal nightmare. Thankfully, the lawyer answered immediately. "I'm on my way," she said sharply after hearing Elena's frantic explanation. "Don't sign anything until I get there." The surgery had already begun when Victor finally appeared. Inna Borisovna had miraculously secured temporary permission for the emergency procedure without the second parent's formal consent, citing a threat to the child's life. Victor burst into the ward, disheveled, out of breath, an expensive leather briefcase tucked under his arm, his tie askew and genuine, primal fear in his eyes. "Where's Igor? What's wrong with him?" "He looks sincerely terrified." "He's in surgery," Elena replied, surprised by the sudden calm in her voice. "Where were you?" "We called you 20 times. "An important project presentation for investors." He ran a hand over his face. "My phone was on silent. Maxim got through to the office. The secretary found me." He faltered, noticing Maxim in the doorway. The 16-year-old stared at his father with an unreadable expression. "Igor was asking for you," Maxim said, and those simple words hung in the air like a heavy accusation. Before they took him to the operating room, he kept asking if you'd come. Something shifted in Victor's face, realization, like a painful awakening from a long, deep sleep. He lowered his eyes, staring at his polished shoes, now streaked with spring mud. "I'm here. What needs to be done? Sign something? Pay for something?" The next hours were filled with agonizing waiting. Victor sat on a hard plastic chair in the hallway, unnaturally rigid, as if he'd swallowed a rod. He tried to talk to Liza several times, but the girl only glared at him from under her brow and clung tighter to her mother. "Are they okay?" he asked Elena when the kid stepped away to the water machine. "They feel like strangers to me now." "Did you think would be otherwise?" she asked wearily. "You've seen them maybe 3 times in the last 2 months. You missed Liza's birthday. You didn't show up for Maxim's important competition." The surgeon emerged as dusk settled outside. The operation was successful, he smiled. We caught it in time. The appendix was on the verge of rupturing. The boy's in a recovery ward now. We'll move him to a regular room tomorrow. Only then did Elena allow herself to sit and close her eyes for a moment. The adrenaline ebbed, leaving her utterly drained. Angela tapped her long nails impatiently on the glass surface of a table in a trendy restaurant. Seriously, you're not coming again? This is the third time this month. Nikolai Andreevich flew in from abroad just for this meeting. Her voice on the phone crackled with barely concealed irritation. My son's in the hospital after surgery, Victor replied quietly, gazing at Igor's pale, gaunt face. Can't your ex take care of him? A low male laugh came through the line. Say hi to Igor Borisovich. Angela added before hanging up. Igor Borisovich, the senior partner at their firm, a 50-year-old man with an impeccable reputation and a piercing gaze, had long shown unambiguous interest in Angela, not particularly hiding it even in Victor's presence. Strangely, this thought stirred neither jealousy nor anger in Victor, only a dull weariness and vague, inexplicable relief. Elena returned to Igor's ward early in the morning, relieving Victor, who had stayed by his son's bedside all night without sleeping. You need to rest, she said, noting the dark circles under his eyes. I'll stay with him. I don't remember the last time I just sat and watched him sleep, Victor admitted suddenly. Probably 5 years ago, when he had some childhood infection with a high fever. They sat on opposite sides of the hospital bed, former spouses bound by invisible but unbreakable ties of parenthood. That box, he began hesitantly. I didn't expect. I thought it would be things. Things, Elena echoed. Like the ones you give Angela? I don't give her anything meaningful, he replied sharply. That's not my business, Elena said softly. The silence was broken only by the quiet beeping of medical equipment. I looked through the photos, Victor continued. I read your captions. It was like reliving those years. And you know what's the worst part? I don't remember half of those moments. Can you imagine? But you remember every single one. Elena looked at her hands. Hands of a doctor, accustomed to healing others' pain but powerless against her own. When you love, you remember the details, she said simply. Igor stirred in his sleep, his eyelashes fluttering. I want to increase the alimony, Victor said suddenly, voluntarily, and cover all the medical expenses, and learn to be a better father. Can I do that? Elena looked at the man she once loved more than life. In his eyes was a tentative hope, not for reclaiming the past, but for forgiveness and a chance to start anew. Can you? She replied. Not for me, for them. They need you far more than you think. Outside the ward's window, a new day dawned. For the first time in a long while, the spring sun broke confidently through the gray clouds, promising warmth after a long, harsh winter. Autumn painted the city in warm amber and crimson hues, bringing not only cool air but also the scent of change. 6 months had flashed by like a single moment, yet stretched into a small lifetime, changing much while, strangely, restoring some lost inner balance. Elena lingered in Marina Semyonovna's office after the morning meeting. The head of the department adjusted her elegant glasses and smiled with that rare, slightly sly smile reserved for moments of genuine satisfaction. Congratulations, Elena Viktorovna. The board has approved your candidacy for deputy head of the pediatric department. Once, she would have rushed to share this news with Victor. Now, her first thought was of the children, how Liza would beam, how Maxim would stand taller with pride, how Igor would bounce with excitement. That evening, setting a modest celebratory table, Elena caught a reflection in the dark window glass. Her posture was straighter. Her eyes held a lively, confident spark that had nearly faded in the final, heavy years of her marriage to Victor. She was no longer a woman who had lost her husband and her familiar way of life. She was herself, whole, self-sufficient, surrounded by those who truly mattered to her. The shards of her former life, once painful and sharp, had somehow formed a new, surprisingly harmonious mosaic. Maxim won the regional track and field championship and was now seriously preparing for the national competition. Liza, smiling openly and joyfully for the first time in ages, was invited to participate in a prestigious city exhibition of young talents with her musical etudes. Igor, fully recovered from his surgery, tore around the apartment with the irrepressible energy of a 7-year-old world explorer. And Victor had parted ways with Angela, who, after a month of ostentatious outings with Igor Borisovic, had officially moved on to a new position and a new personal life with the senior partner. She was always too pragmatic, Victor said during one of their now less tense meetings with Elena, trying to mask the bitterness with light irony. He now visited the children twice a week. At first, it was awkward, almost painful. He sat on the edge of the couch like an uninvited guest, unsure where to put his hands or what to say. Maxim initially stormed off to his room, slamming the door. But gradually, the ice began to thaw, especially after Victor spent 3 consecutive weekends helping his son prepare for an important competition. Not just giving advice, but running alongside him on the track, strategizing, supporting, and cheering. Something intangible shifted in their strained relationship, like a river, long blocked, finally finding its old course, slightly altered by the flood. The school auditorium was packed. The annual autumn concert always drew not just students and teachers, but also countless parents, grandparents, and relatives. Elena sat in the 3rd row, nervously clutching the program. Today, all 3 of her children were performing. Maxim with a sports team and a complex acrobatic routine, Liza with a solo piano piece, and even little Igor in a group dance with the 1st graders. "Mind if I join you?" Victor's quiet, familiar voice made her start. He stood in the aisle, holding a modest bouquet of wildflowers. She'd always preferred them to lavish store-bought arrangements. "Of course," she shifted to make room. "The kids will be thrilled you came." 2 rows away, she noticed Alexei, who gave her a friendly nod. Victor caught the fleeting glance, and something imperceptible flickered across his face. When Liza stepped onto stage, slender, fragile, in a simple white dress, and sat at the piano, which seemed too large for her small frame, Elena felt Victor beside her hold his breath. The music flowed pure, piercing, slightly melancholic yet astonishingly bright. It seemed to carry the entire story of their complicated family. The pain of recent separation and a tentative hope for a new, still unclear but brighter future. After the concert, as proud and excited parents swarmed their talented children, Victor suggested, "How about we all go to that little cafe on the corner to celebrate our star's success?" Alexei, standing nearby with a bouquet for Liza, looked at Elena with slight hesitation. "Alexei's invited too, of course," she added quickly, and Victor, though his expression darkened slightly, nodded in agreement. In the cozy cafe with checkered tablecloths and the warm scent of fresh pastries, they settled around a large round table. The children, buzzing with the thrill of their success and attention, chattered nonstop. Victor and Alexei sat on opposite sides of Elena, creating a strange, almost tangible field of tension. 2 different worlds touching but not merging. When the kids stepped away to the dessert counter, Victor leaned toward Elena, his eyes betraying poorly concealed turmoil. "Are you 2 together?" he asked bluntly, nodding toward Alexei, who was showing Liza a silly napkin trick, making her laugh. Elena looked at her ex-husband, still handsome, confident, with faint gray at his temples that had appeared in recent months. "We're friends," she replied calmly. "We just share common interests, mutual respect, something we probably always lacked." He sees the kids for who they are, not as projections of his own unfulfilled expectations or ambitions. Victor froze, as if her words were a sudden, staggering revelation. In that moment, he seemed to understand with piercing, devastating clarity. He hadn't lost Elena when he met Angela, but much earlier, when he stopped seeing her as a separate person, stopped truly caring about her thoughts, her feelings, her inner world. "I understand," he said quietly, and for the first time, his words rang completely sincere, without a hint of pretense or self-justification. The autumn park greeted them with the soft rustle of falling leaves and the fresh, invigorating scent of recent rain. Family weekends had become a new, still fragile tradition. Victor took the kids for the whole day, and sometimes, if her work schedule allowed, Elena joined them. This time, Alexei was there too, bringing a huge, stunningly beautiful kite he'd made himself. "It's almost a real hang glider, just in miniature," he explained enthusiastically to Igor, helping untangle the long, colorful tail of patchwork fabric. See the shape of the wings? It creates lift, almost like a real bird. Victor had brought gifts too, but this time they weren't hasty, expensive trinkets. They were things the children truly dreamed of, things they'd mentioned or written in their secret wish lists. Professional running shoes for Maxim, chosen with his coach's recommendation. A rare set of watercolor paints and special paper for Liza, which she'd sighed over for months. And a real children's telescope for Igor, who had recently become obsessed with studying stars and planets. "How did you know?" Elena asked, genuinely surprised, as Igor squealed with delight, unpacking the heavy telescope box. "I listened," Victor replied simply, his voice free of its former arrogance. Finally started listening. They launched the kite as a big, noisy group. Alexei explained the complex technique. Victor held the frame firmly, and the kids helped with the long string. Elena sat on a bench a little ways off, watching the bright, colorful marvel rise slowly but steadily higher, becoming a fluttering speck in the vast autumn sky. Victor sat beside her as the others ran across the field with shouts and laughter, trying to control the kite's flight. In the distance, Igor was passionately explaining something to Alexei, waving his arms wildly, and Alexei listened with genuine, attentive interest, not just pretending to understand, but truly trying to follow the child's complex logic. "Remember that box?" Victor asked suddenly, following her gaze. "With the photos and drawings?" Elena nodded, not taking her eyes off the soaring kite. "I still keep it," he continued, his voice now carrying not nostalgia for what was lost, but new, deep realization. "Not as a reminder what I lost, but as an important lesson. Sometimes I look through those photos, reread your captions. It helps me remember what really matters in life. I think I never knew how to see or value the true worth of moments while they were happening." She turned to him and saw not agonizing longing for the past, but a calm, almost humble acceptance of the present. "We'll never be the same," she said softly, "but maybe we can become something better, at least for them." The kite soared high above, free, light, reaching for the sky, like their new, challenging, but no longer hopeless life. Not together, but not entirely apart, connected by the thin yet strong invisible threads of shared history and parental love. They had finally found the fragile but essential balance their marriage had so desperately lacked. Respect for each other's boundaries, sincere care without pretense, and the remarkable ability to find joy in each other's happiness, even if the happiness now followed parallel, non-intersecting paths. The setting autumn sun cast a golden, shimmering halo around the soaring kite, and for a moment it seemed the entire world was filled with this warm, farewell light that was also so full of promise, a light of new beginnings, of uncharted horizons, opening not to those who cling desperately to the past, but to those who find the courage and strength to let it go and move forward. Thank you for listening. Please share your thoughts on the story in the comments. See you in new videos.